Do you want to kick off today's video with a joke? I thought we'd keep things light, kick off with a bit of a joke, you know, have a bit of a joke. So here's a joke for you. For over a year, and only more virulently in the months and weeks before its release, Cyberpunk 2077's fans defended the game they loved but hadn't played from any and all criticism. The slightest objection to Cyberpunk 2077 being seen as the greatest video game of all time was quickly rallied against and swatted down and attacked en masse. The suggestion that CD Projekt Red could ever do any wrong was blasphemy to these people. You couldn't mention CDPR's workplace toxicity. You couldn't question CDPR's questionable relationship with socio-political issues. You couldn't even say that the game gave you a seizure when the game gave you a seizure without Cyberpunk 2077 fans pointing at you and thinking, that criticism is a little too far. And then Cyberpunk 2077 came out. Video game discourse is completely fucking broken. It's been broken since before I even started talking about video games for a living, and I can tell you it was broken then because it's broken now, and it's the exact same fucking discourse. You think the weeks of outrage leading up to and immediately following Cyberpunk 2077's release constitutes a new phenomenon? Oh no, it's not even the first time it's happened this year. As you might have forgotten already, but The Last of Us Part 2 came out a few months ago and sent fandoms into spirals of irrational anger. Before then it was Death Stranding, Red Dead Redemption 2, Smash Brothers, it goes on. In 2006 it was Twilight Princess. At the time the most important, soul-rendingly crucial game of all time. I mean, it was that important. They're always that important. For about 2 weeks, and then they're not anymore. Twilight Princess isn't even the most important Zelda game, let alone the most important game period. But that's how it was treated. It's how all these games are treated for about 2 weeks after they come out, and then everyone realizes that, oh, this is just a fucking video game. It's not actually the center of the goddamn universe. But GameSpot reviewer Jeff Gerstmann notoriously gave the, at the time, latest Legend of Zelda 8.8 out of 10, and was harassed for it, hounded for it, hated for it. That was around the time I started getting into games media myself, and it set the course for nearly 2 decades of unbelievable bullshit, circular arguments, and a discussion that only evolves in terms of how vicious it gets, never in terms of content or resolution. Review shouldn't have scores. Review should be objective. Reviewers should 100% a game before writing about it. But Metacritic, though. I've seen these same arguments since 2006. I've been there for all of them, and they've never once changed. Like pretty much all mainstream video game discourse, it's stagnant, boring, and unbelievably toxic. You all know the routine by now, because a routine is what it is. You know what to expect when a major so-called AAA game drops its review embargo and the critical consensus comes in. For the most part, it's always a consensus. It's simply a fact that the majority of big-budget mass-market AAA games will enjoy incredibly high review scores. In reviews that sometimes don't mention important things like the story because the story has been embargoed by the publisher, or the bugs, which we heard nothing about until the game came out. How does that happen? Anyway, it's not like all video game reviews are completely vapid and unchallenging. There are always outliers. When a new, massively hyped video game comes out, people who do have something more critical to say, people who don't want to just say, great graphics, 10 out of 10. There's always a handful, or at least one, and for them, the knives are inevitable. They know it's coming. You know it's coming. And in my past experience in games media, the publications hosting the reviews know it's coming, but often leave the reviewer on their own, stranded to face the harassment alone. So yeah, the massive gamer hate train, we all know it's coming. We know that for the crime of not liking a video game as much as other people on the internet think they might like it, because it's not out yet, they're about to be dogpiled, harassed, threatened, and attacked. I've been in that position many times as someone who doesn't agree with the statistical notion that almost every single AAA video game is a fucking masterpiece. They said Grand Theft Auto 4 was the fucking Godfather. Many of you will already know the most famous review backlashes I've had, such as when I dared to give only an 8 out of 10 to Gears of War 3, or when people thought I was out of my mind for disliking Final Fantasy 13, even though history is more or less caught up with me on that one. There was a period of time where I was a villain for saying that Quantic Dream wasn't all that good. Imagine that. There was a period of time where you couldn't say a bad word against Quantic Dream, because this was a period before people realised they could do a lot better than Quantic Dream. There was that time I said Assassin's Creed 2 was bad but loved the Saboteur, and I stick by that. The Saboteur is better than Assassin's Creed 2, or at least it was. I mean, I've not played either of them since they first came out. There were, of course, the famous DDoS attacks I got for the 5 out of 10 No Man's Sky review and the 7 out of 10 I gave to Breath of the Wild. These are merely the more notable ones, however. I've received threats, insults, stalking, and more over the years from people who claim to love video games, but express nothing but abject hatred. I don't know, maybe if I just focused on graphics and levels and are there glitches, I'd have been a far more successful game critic. Who needs to look at anything else? What else are games? Right, kids? Because that's what people actually want from their video game reviews. They want video games to be treated like the most important cultural touchstone of a generation, and nothing more than flashy children's toys with no depth or nuance. Just tell us, is it graphics good, gun shoot, bang bang, feel nice? 10 out of 10 please, thank you. I'll never forget the moments before reviews for Grand Theft Auto 5 were published. It was like waiting to go over the top of the fucking trench. Just 1,000-mile stares as people braced for the hardcore gamers and their seeming desire to be upset by critical appraisal for a game, again, they hadn't played yet. Game wasn't out at that point, and let me tell you, there is a very genuine wish to be distressed among some of these people. I've seen communities whip themselves up into a frenzy over reviews they haven't read yet. I've seen communities merely guess what certain reviewers, such as myself, might say, and get themselves worked up over that. This was taken, of course, to its most ridiculous extreme when I woke up one morning to find I'd given Super Mario Odyssey a 7 out of 10 and was being pilloried for it. I had never reviewed Odyssey. It was released after I stopped giving out scores, and it was actually one of my favourite games of the year. But the overwhelming evidence provided by reality is not enough for people so zealously impassioned about video games, they are ready to go to war for them before the guns are even cocked. They're like the fucking fundies who look forward to Christmas just so they can shout at anyone saying happy holidays and cry about how Starbucks is oppressing them. GTA 5 review embargo day was one of the shittiest days I'd had as a reviewer. It fucking sucked. Despite almost unanimous praise from the critics, GTA 5's pre-fans, you could only call them pre-fans before the games come out, were nonetheless looking for things to be fucking angry over. So they started digging out single negative sentences and paragraphs in otherwise positive reviews and getting mad at those. Happened to me a few times that day, happened to others. At one point I just sat in the bathroom and muttered Jesus Christ to myself because the sheer desperation by Gamers TM to be angry was just staggering. I think this is when I officially recognised that the gaming discourse was beyond salvation. It was another GameSpot reviewer, Carolyn Petit, that got it worse, with so-called gamers demanding she be fired over her, what was the score? Oh, 9 out of 10 GTA 5 review, because she mentioned, in one small part of her otherwise glowing write-up, that there was misogynistic content in it, which, yeah, there is. It's GTA 5, that's just a fact. But to some gamers, factual information is the last thing they want in reviews, even while paradoxically claiming that all reviews should be fucking objective. Ironically, many of them come from the facts don't care about your feelings crowd, but they clutch their pearls and scream the scream that levels nations if you point out uncomfortable facts regarding their favourite toys. And of course, the crowning example from this year is Cyberpunk 2077, with fans as scarily loyal and willing to excuse anything, except bugs apparently, as CD Projekt Red's fanbase. It was never going to be pretty. Many people in games media were bracing for yet another round of the same fucking fight that's been had multiple times a year since the 2000s. And when those reviews were published, there was no pleasant surprise. People weren't suddenly chill and accepting of anything that wasn't 100% universal praise. No. The slightest deviation from the narrative that Cyberpunk was the greatest game of all time would be quickly corrected by an army of corporate loyalists who won't hear one bad word said against a product they decided to love before it was even out from a company that doesn't actually care about them. Now that's punk. As I said earlier, while the routine itself doesn't ever change, the scale of the nastiness does. This was exemplified earlier in the week when self-styled Cyberpunk 2077 fans literally tried to commit assault on a video game reviewer for pointing out, once again, a cast-iron objective fact. See, Cyberpunk is a very edgy and punk game, and one of the punkest things it does is potentially induce seizures by using flashing colours in a pattern specifically designed to induce seizures, something CDPR excused by pointing out a warning that was in the EULA. The exact same EULA that does itself joke about how nobody reads EULAs. Guess what? I say EULA, not EULA. I don't have time for that. Now that's punk. Anyway, while CDPR was working on fixing that incredibly punk move, the game reviewer who pointed out she literally had a very real seizure playing the game she otherwise totally fucking loves was descended upon by children who had their feelings hurt by the facts. Their response to someone saying Cyberpunk gave her seizures was to try and give her more seizures. For the crime of simply stating a thing that happened, the reviewer was bombarded by flashing light videos attempting to trigger a physical response, which, if you didn't know, is literally assault. Assault! Like, in some places it's very actionable as a criminal attack. Because that's what it is. Trying to make someone have a seizure is an actual violent assault, folks. I can't stress that enough. And what's more, you can't even say this was over the game's critical reception. This was one straightforward, objective statement of fact. And the Cyberpunk zealots couldn't handle it. Now that's punk. You don't want objectivity. You want obedience, you want compliance, you want consensus, you want 100% coddling, pandering, agreement. That's what you want. You know, it's funny, there are so many self-styled, angry, hardcore gamers out there who complain about video games pandering to people, pandering to marginalized gamers, pandering to minorities. Then you see one person state an objective fact about a video game and get bombarded with seizure videos, and you realize all these particular gamers want is pandering. They just want to be the sole recipient every single second of every single day of their pampered little lives. That's why they behave this way. They're so used to getting everything they want that when someone doesn't toe the line, however slight the deviation, they're attacked as an aberrant thing. Out comes the harassment, out come the calls to have the reviewer fired. The message from the Cyberpunk fandom's more militant wing was simple: don't dare fucking speak up. This was justified by some of the less militant fans who reminded myself and others that, if you think about it, the game's press did kind of ask for it by apparently having it out for Cyberpunk. I'm guessing by having it out, they mean publishing reports of the abuse and crunch and workplace toxicity at CDPR. More of that no good factual information spoiling the party. It's fucking funny too, they act, right, as if there was this press allegiance against CD Projekt Red, one of the most adored and fucking fawned over studios in the world. And then you look at the reviews that do what mainstream game reviews always do. They gloss over or outright sweep under the rug any of the ethical issues that have been reported about the game the year before, so they can just focus on the game itself in a vapid and cowardly attempt to contribute to the discussion while contributing precisely fuck all to the discussion. They do it with Ubisoft, they do it with every exploitative in-game economy. They sure as fuck did it with Cyberpunk. But no amount of critical acclaim, no amount of praise is ever enough for a bizarre and frankly frightening strain of so-called hardcore gamer. A person so lacking in nuance and depth that unless you literally say a game is perfect, you're an enemy worthy of violent physical assault. I've seen people lose their shit over Nintendo games not getting 10 out of 10s. I've seen commenters that write entire essays in response to one negative sentence in an otherwise completely positive review. Like, it's not enough to just disagree on a point, they have to nuke, as best they can, the slightest critique. Especially if the critique is justified, which it is when you say that it's weird how The Witcher 3 is almost 99% white people. The fact that huge title launches like Cyberpunk 2077 always have game reviewers bracing for harassment and attacks, and always have an army of bros ready to tear down anyone who dares say a fucking video game isn't literally perfect, is most definitely a problem the so-called AAA game industry itself has done fuck all to curb and ducked all accountability for, and yes, a lot of this does fall on the industry's shoulders. They never told anyone to stop this shit for over almost 20 years of it. They've never asked anyone to stop going to battle for them. When there was a full-on organised hate campaign over video games, most publishers fully ignored it. A cynic would say it benefited them. Game publishers just go further and further to inspire loyalty, hype and obsession in their fan bases. And whew, did they fucking get it. They have tiny little sycophants out there trying to keep critics in line with seizures now. It's a level of mindless, puppet-esque corporate loyalty previously only dreamed of in our most dystopian of fiction. So it's fitting that Cyberpunk 2077 should inspire so fucking much of it. All to lead up to this huge punchline that the game they've been fucking standing for over a year is riddled with bugs. Deliciously the one problem that gamer bros actually take seriously because it doesn't just affect other people. Oh, they'll defend the toxic work conditions, they'll defend the seizures, but bugs? They'll affect your video game, even if you're straight or a guy. So now it's a wheel problem. This whole situation demonstrates just how fucking stupid anyone is to get pissy and mad about a game review for a video game that hasn't even been published yet. You idiots. Are you gonna send seizure videos to yourself now for dinging it in the Metacritic user reviews? Or at the very least, will you, I don't know, apologise for being such morons? No, you won't, because bugs are apparently the only important thing in the game industry, right? To all of these unpaid fucking puppets of video game publishers, I say this. Please, for the love of God, get more than video games into your life. If you've become so obsessed, so thoughtlessly and violently obsessed with games that you're prepared to assault someone over them, you've not got the perspective left to healthily engage with the things. Clearly there is something deeply wrong if video games make you behave so frenziedly. For one reason or another, you've tied so much of your identity and sense of happiness to your entertainment that any imagined threat to your piggybacked joy, and it's not always imagined, will make you lash out like a wounded animal. You know, Gamergate was weird, right? Deeply fucked up weird. Years-long hate campaigns over video game journalism, based in lies to begin with. You know that was fucking peculiar behaviour. Not rational in the least. And surely you know on some level that it's very disturbing to try and trigger seizures in someone because you like the customised dick video game. Or at least you thought you did before you played it and it glitched out on you. I believe that you can love something too much, that you can become obsessed with anything to the point of losing all sense of nuance, context and perspective. For some people that's evangelicalism, for others it's nerd culture, which seems to particularly inspire a kind of religious love that borders on troubling at the best of times. When you've reached the point that video games of all things are so crucial to your happiness that you're willing to do real life harm in their name, you need to stop. Take a break. Find another hobby. Find friends. I mean it. I'm not saying this as a snarky bit. I've tried snarking at you people. I've tried reasoning with you. I've tried outright berating you. None of it will ever take. All I'm left with is the thing you hate most. The statement of fact. The fact is this, you can call yourself a hardcore gamer all you like, but if you're violently harassing people over video game reviews, you're no hardcore gamer. You literally can't fucking handle video games. Now learn to regulate your fucking emotions. I can recommend a therapist. Oh, Cyberpunk 2077. The way you capitulate to Twitch's DMCA guidelines and tie gender to voice is so punk! Anyway, my message to fellow hardcore gamers, because that's definitely what I am, is to, well, listen to everything I say because I know what's best for you. You don't have to tie your sense of identity and self-worth to a video game. You don't have to take video games that seriously. Listen to me, as someone who wrongfully dedicated their life and their career to taking video games too seriously. Don't do it! Don't do it! You do not need every single AAA video game day and date. You do not need to be part of the broken discourse. Take a leaf out of my book. Instead of playing Cyberpunk, I started taking estrogen. Now that's fucking punk. Ooh, fuck one for me. I mean, that'll do, won't it?